This is our next method of work holding that we're going to be talking about, which is to use some hot glue. This I consider to be the duct tape of glue because it's hot glue. So yeah, this one's pretty easy to use too. I usually just put a few blobs of glue on the material, typically on the corners, just because it's easier to pop off. I also think about where the parts are going to be being carved out of. So if I'm going to make like a dish, for example, here, and I don't want it to fly out, I'll put a dab of glue in the center too. So this one I already preheated, I don't have it plugged in. You gotta work pretty fast because the hot glue cools down and gets hard. So let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of using hot glue. So in terms of the advantages, it's it's cheap, it's simple, it's easy to use. I really like using it because it doesn't matter, like I don't need to plan out anything. I just dab hot glue and I'm going. The other advantage is that it works pretty well for uneven surfaces because it can fill in the gaps that are there with the glue. So in this case, because our wasteboard is pretty pockmarked, the glue I know will fill in the gaps. The downside is that you have to work pretty quickly to keep the glue liquid. And sometimes if you don't do it fast enough, the glue will harden and your piece will be uneven. The second is that the glue is relatively thick in terms of the gap that it's going to create. In most cases, it won't really matter, but it is something to be conscious of, especially if you're doing V-carving, where the distance of how deep you're cutting matters in terms of how wide the carvings come out. Generally, where I would use hot glue is uneven surfaces, uneven parts. I use this a lot for cookies or live edge and things like that, where the material is rarely rough and I just need to secure it down so I can cut it down, plane it, use the machine for whatever. And the hot glue is also pretty strong. It is stronger than the double-sided tape. Generally speaking, I know it works pretty well. What I find is that for metals, it doesn't work very well, and it's probably because it's not porous and the heat conducts away from the hot glue really fast, so it cools down and shrinks on one side, whereas on the wood side it grips pretty well. In some materials it'll work. Plastics and woods work pretty well. For metals it doesn't work very well. At this point it's pretty hard to take off. I usually use a paint scraper to pop the part off so you can see. Because I know that each corner has the glue, I can just go at each corner and there you go. So you can see that the glue is still stuck to the material, and I have to go in and use the paint scraper to remove the glue. And I should add that the other disadvantage is that usually there's a bit of glue residue left on the material itself, and you can usually scrape most of it off, but there's still a little bit like sunken into the wood. So if you're going to use this, you can put the glue on places you won't use for the final part, or just plan to be doing a little bit of sanding. Another thing is that isopropyl alcohol can help dissolve some of the glue, but it might not be great for the wood. So those are some of the other things to consider when using hot glue.